The black wolf emerged from the tree line like a shadow breaking free from the forest. Samuel Blackridge felt his breath catch in his throat, 100 yards away. His elderly German shepherd Max stood motionless, arthritic ears somehow perked to attention despite his partial deafness. "Max, come back, boy!" Sam's voice cracked with panic. The massive wolf lowered its head, muscles tensing beneath its midnight coat. Sam fumbled for the leash he should have used. 50 yards separated predator from prey now. "Someone get the sheriff!" a woman screamed from the lakeside picnic area. Max stood his ground, gray muzzle pointed toward the advancing threat. The wolf accelerated suddenly, powerful legs eating up the distance between them with terrifying speed. "Max!" Sam broke into a run, knowing he'd never make it in time. The wolf launched itself through the air directly at the old dog. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Silver Creek. Montana sat nestled between the imposing granite peaks of the Bitterroot Mountains and the sprawling pine forests that had sustained the logging town for generations. A place where tradition ran as deep as the roots of the ancient trees, where most folks still believed wild things belonged in the wild, and where the line between civilization and wilderness was drawn with conviction born of hard experience. Samuel "Sam" Blackridge hadn't always belonged here. He'd moved to Silver Creek 3 years ago, after 27 years with the Phoenix Fire Department had left him with a pension, a missing left ring finger, and nightmares that still woke him sweating most nights. The town knew him as the quiet widower who'd bought old Jim Kessler's cabin by Silver Lake after Jim had passed. They knew he kept to himself, except for trips to Maggie's diner for Thursday meatloaf, and his daily walks with that big German shepherd of his. Max had come with better credentials than his owner. Even at 10 years old, with gray frosting his muzzle and arthritis, slowing his once powerful stride. Folks remembered how the search and rescue dog had become a local hero during the Silver Peak forest fire. Pictures of Max leading firefighters to stranded hikers still hung in the town hall, right next to the memorial for the 2 rangers who hadn't made it out. Sheriff Robert "Bobby" Thompson had been running Silver Creek for nearly 2 decades. At 62, his weathered face and unwavering confidence in his own judgment made him both respected and feared. He'd seen what wolves could do to livestock, to hunting dogs, to the delicate balance of the community he'd sworn to protect. To Bobby, wolves were simply another threat to manage. Dr. Emily Carson saw things differently. The wildlife biologist had moved to Silver Creek 5 years ago to study the controversial wolf reintroduction program. Her scientific approach often clashed with local sentiment, but her genuine respect for the community had gradually earned her a precarious acceptance. Maggie Williams had seen it all in her 70 years running the town's only diner. Nothing escaped her notice or her opinion. "That man's carrying more weight than his shoulders were built for," she'd commented to anyone who'd listened when Sam first arrived. "But that dog of his, that dog's got soul in his eyes." Little did any of them know how those words would prove more prophetic than they could imagine. 3 years earlier, the Silver Peak forest fire had devoured over 20,000 acres of pristine Montana wilderness in just 4 days. Sam Blackridge, newly arrived in Silver Creek and still raw from losing Jenny, had volunteered alongside his trained search and rescue companion, Max. Despite being newcomers, they joined the frontline efforts when reports came in of hikers trapped on Eagle Ridge trails. "That dog of yours certified for this kind of work?" Sheriff Thompson had asked skeptically, eyeing the German shepherd's professional harness. Sam had simply nodded. 8 years with Phoenix Fire Department. He's found people in worse than this. The skepticism evaporated on their second day when Max led rescuers to a family of 4 who had become disoriented in the smoke. By the third day, even the most hardened local rangers deferred to the dog's instincts as he worked tirelessly, muzzle low to the ground, weaving through smoldering underbrush to track human scent. It was on that third day, with the fire-jumping containment lines and evacuation orders extending to the outer reaches of Silver Creek itself, that Max had suddenly veered off the search grid. Sam called after him, but the German Shepherd ignored commands for the first time in his career, plunging deeper into a ravine choked with smoke. "Max! Return Max!" Sam had shouted, following his partner despite the danger warnings blaring over his radio. He found Max whining urgently beside the body of a large black wolf. The mother wolf lay dead, likely overcome by smoke, her body curled protectively around something small and dark. As Sam approached, he saw the tiny movement, a wolf pup, barely breathing but alive, tucked against its mother's cooling body. "Jesus Christ, Max," Sam had muttered, understanding flooding through him. His dog wasn't trained to find wildlife. This was something else entirely. A choice. Protocol dictated leaving the wildlife for specialized teams. The radio crackled with urgent reports of the fire front changing direction, but Max stood firm, looking from the pup to Sam with an intensity that brooked no argument. "This is Black Ridge," Sam had radioed in. "We've got a special extraction, requesting support for wildlife rescue." The criticism came later, after photos of Sam carrying the wolf pup to safety made their way around town. Not everyone appreciated resources being diverted for wildlife during a human emergency, despite Sam's insistence that he and Max had acted independently. Off-grid. "Wolves are being reintroduced by the government already," Bobby Thompson had complained publicly at the town meeting a week later. "We don't need to be hand-raising more of them ourselves," Dr. Emily Carson had defended the rescue. "That pup represents an important bloodline from one of our most successful packs. Its mother was the alpha female of the North Ridge pack." The pup had been taken to the Regional Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, scheduled for eventual relocation to a wilderness area far from Silver Creek. But 2 days before the planned transfer, the center reported the young wolf had somehow escaped its enclosure, disappearing into the surrounding forest despite its young age. Most assumed the pup had perished, too young to hunt effectively on its own. The story faded from local gossip, replaced by debates about fire prevention and forest management. Life in Silver Creek settled back into its familiar rhythms. For 3 years, Sam and Max had walked the shores of Silver Lake each morning, rain or shine. Max's once powerful stride gradually stiffened with age. His hearing, damaged during years of working around sirens and equipment, deteriorated until Sam relied more on hand signals than voice commands. The heroic search and rescue dog became simply an old companion, content to sniff along familiar trails and doze in patches of sunlight on Sam's porch. But in recent months, Max had seemed to withdraw further. He showed less interest in their walks, less enthusiasm for the tennis balls Sam still hopefully brought along. The local vet mentioned age-related depression, not uncommon in working dogs who had lost their purpose. Sam recognized the symptoms all too well from his own battle with meaning after Jenny's death. The first reports of wolf sightings came in early June. Bobby Miller's son, claimed to have seen a large black wolf while fishing upstream from town. Few took the teenager seriously until Ellie Parsons, who ran the post office, reported her own sighting a week later. Big as a small bear, she insisted to the lunch crowd at Maggie's diner. Standing bold as brass at the edge of my property, staring at my house like it was memorizing the address. Sheriff Thompson called a town meeting after rancher Pete Davidson found 2 of his calves killed in a pasture less than 5 miles from the town center. "We've got ourselves a problem," the sheriff announced to the packed community hall. "Wildlife Services has confirmed these kills are consistent with wolf predation. This isn't some passing animal. It's hunting in our backyard." The meeting quickly divided along familiar lines. Ranchers and many longtime residents supported immediate action, tracking and eliminating the threat before more livestock or, God forbid, pets or people became victims. Dr. Carson and the newer conservation-minded residents urged caution and non-lethal deterrence. "There's something unusual about these sightings," Dr. Carson insisted, pointing to her map with red pins marking each reported location. "This wolf isn't behaving normally. It's staying too close to human habitation. But it's not showing typical problem behaviors. It seems to be observing. I'd like more time to study its patterns before any drastic measures are taken." Sheriff Thompson's patience visibly thinned. "With all due respect to your scientific interest, Dr. Carson, I'm responsible for public safety. If this animal is as comfortable around humans as reports suggest, that's not a research opportunity. It's a disaster waiting to happen." Sam had sat quietly in the back of the meeting hall, only half listening. His thoughts were with Max, who seemed to be having an increasingly difficult time getting up from his bed each morning. Wolf or no wolf, Sam's concerns were closer to home. He couldn't have imagined then how intertwined those concerns would soon become. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of perfect summer day that reminded Sam why he'd chosen Silver Creek to rebuild what remained of his life. Max had seemed unusually alert at breakfast, actually finishing his food and nudging Sam's hand repeatedly until the leash came off its hook by the door. "Someone's feeling frisky today," Sam remarked, a small spark of hope kindling in his chest. Perhaps the old dog was finally shaking off whatever melancholy had gripped him these past months. They took their usual route around Silver Lake, Sam deliberately keeping a slower pace to accommodate Max's arthritic gait. The trail curved through stands of lodgepole pine before opening to a pebbly beach on the lake's northern shore. Few tourists ventured this far from the designated recreation areas, leaving it peaceful even during the height of summer. Sam paused to skip stones across the glassy water, a childhood habit he'd never outgrown. Max wandered along the shoreline, nose to the ground, investigating the morning's new scents with more interest than he'd shown in weeks. It wasn't until the 3rd stone sank beneath the surface that Sam noticed something odd about Max's behavior. The German shepherd had frozen, his attention fixed on the tree line across the small inlet. Every muscle in the dog's body seemed tense, his tail straight out behind him. "What is it?" "Boy." Sam squinted toward the trees, seeing nothing unusual in the dappled shadows. Then he spotted it, a subtle movement against the darker background of the forest, something large and black, partially obscured by undergrowth, watching them from just inside the tree line. Sam's hand instinctively went to his hip, where a service weapon would have been during his firefighting days. Finding nothing, he reached slowly for the heavy walking stick he'd brought along. "Max, come," he commanded, forgetting momentarily about the dog's hearing loss. When Max didn't respond, Sam stepped forward, intending to take hold of the dog's collar. Before he could reach him, the shape in the forest emerged into full view. The black wolf was magnificent, far larger than Sam had imagined from the town's reports. Its coat gleamed in the morning sunlight, muscles rippling beneath as it took deliberate steps from the forest's edge. Its eyes, amber and intelligent, were locked not on Sam, but on Max. "Max!" Sam shouted, loud enough this time to penetrate the dog's damaged hearing. "Come here! Now!" But Max remained rooted in place as the wolf advanced, its pace increasing with each step. Other people were beginning to notice. A young couple who had been photographing birds nearby gasped audibly. Someone shouted about getting the sheriff. Sam broke into a stumbling run toward his dog, but the distance between them seemed to stretch impossibly. The wolf was moving faster now, covering ground with fluid grace that made Sam's stomach clench with dread. This wasn't the curious observation Dr. Carson had described. This was purpose. Intent. Max. The desperation in Sam's voice caught in his throat as the wolf launched forward in a full sprint directly toward his beloved companion. Max should have run. Any reasonable dog would have fled from a predator 3 times its fighting weight. But the old German shepherd stood his ground, ears forward, posture alert, but not defensive. The wolf closed the final distance in a blur of motion, and Sam's world narrowed to the horrifying certainty that he was about to witness his best friend's violent end. What happened next stopped Sam in his tracks. The wolf skidded to a halt mere feet from Max, its powerful body lowering in what appeared to be submission. Its head dipped, ears flattened, and most astonishingly, it rolled partially to expose its underside, the universal canine gesture of deference. Sam froze, disbelief warring with the evidence before his eyes. The scattered onlookers fell silent, the only sound the gentle lapping of lake water against the shore. Max took a tentative step forward, nose extended. The wolf remained in its submissive posture, though its eyes never left the old dog. As Max approached, the wolf shifted slightly, revealing a distinctive pattern of scarred tissue along its flank, fur growing in patches over what appeared to be old burn marks. Recognition hit Sam like a physical blow. "Son of a bitch," he whispered. "It can't be." Max circled the wolf slowly, his own posture relaxing with each passing second. Then, in a gesture that drew audible gasps from the growing crowd of onlookers, the old dog touched his nose briefly to the wolf's scarred side before sitting down calmly beside the wild animal. The wolf gradually rose to a normal posture, its initial submission replaced by what could only be described as cautious familiarity. It made no aggressive moves, instead mirroring Max's calm demeanor, the two animals separated by mere inches. "It's the pup," Sam said to nobody in particular, his voice barely audible. "The one from the fire. Has to be." The tableau might have held longer if not for the sound of tires skidding on gravel. Sheriff Thompson's patrol SUV pulled up at the trailhead, followed closely by another vehicle Sam recognized as belonging to Dr. Carson. The wolf's ears pivoted toward the sound, its body tensing once more. Max, sensing the change, turned toward Sam with an expression that seemed almost imploring. "Don't move!" Sheriff Thompson shouted, emerging from his vehicle with his service weapon already drawn. "Sam, call your dog back. Slowly, "Bobby, wait," Sam called back, finding his voice. "Look at them. He's not threatening Max." I said call your dog back." The sheriff's voice left no room for argument as he advanced steadily, his weapon trained on the wolf. Sam whistled sharply, using the emergency recall signal that even Max's damaged hearing could register. The old dog reluctantly turned away from the wolf and began limping back toward his master. The wolf hesitated, looking between Max and the approaching sheriff. For a moment, Sam thought the animal might flee. Instead, it took several deliberate steps after Max, maintaining the same careful distance. "I'm taking the shot," Sheriff Thompson announced, raising his weapon. "Robert, don't—" Dr. Carson had arrived, breathless from her rush down the trail. "This is unprecedented behavior. Look at the interaction." The standoff stretched for several agonizing seconds, the sheriff with his unwavering aim, the wolf following Max with measured steps, Dr. Carson frantically documenting with her camera, and Sam caught in the middle, one hand extended toward his approaching dog. Finally, a sharp crack from a branch breaking under someone's foot in the gathering crowd startled the wolf. With one last look at Max, it turned and melted back into the forest with ghost-like efficiency. The collective tension broke as the wolf disappeared. Max reached Sam's side, leaning heavily against his leg as if suddenly exhausted by the encounter. "What in God's name was that?" Sheriff Thompson demanded, lowering his weapon but keeping his eyes trained on the forest edge. Sam knelt beside Max, one hand automatically finding the scarred patch on his dog's shoulder, the souvenir from the same fire that had claimed a wolf pup's mother. "That," Sam said quietly, "was something I never thought I'd see." By noon, the encounter at Silver Lake had spread through Silver Creek with the speed and creative embellishment that only small-town gossip networks can achieve. Sam's phone rang repeatedly with calls from neighbors he'd barely spoken to in 3 years, each eager to hear firsthand about the wolf whisperer dog and its mysterious wild friend. Maggie Williams had already named the story her special of the day, serving it up alongside her famous blueberry pancakes to a packed house at the diner. "I heard the wolf actually bowed to Max, like he was some kind of royalty," she told a table of wide-eyed tourists. "Old Sam Blackridge says that wolf's the same one his dog pulled out of a forest fire as a pup." Animal remembered who saved its life, came back to pay respects. The truth, as Sam tried to explain to Sheriff Thompson and Dr. Carson in the much quieter setting of his lakeside cabin, was both simpler and more complicated. "I can't prove it's the same wolf," Sam admitted, watching Max doze on his bed in the corner, twitching occasionally in his sleep. "But those burn scars matched where the pup was injured, and the behavior, I've never seen anything like it." Dr. Carson could barely contain her excitement, her notepad already filled with observations and questions. "This could be groundbreaking, Mr. Blackridge. There's very limited documentation of wolves recognizing specific dogs or humans across substantial time periods. If this is indeed the same wolf pup, and it recognized Max after 3 years of separation during a critical developmental period." "What it is," Sheriff Thompson interrupted, "is a public safety concern. That animal showed no fear of humans. It approached a populated area in broad daylight. Next time it might not be playing nice with somebody's pet." "That wasn't playing nice, Bobby," Sam said quietly. "That was gratitude." The sheriff's expression softened momentarily before his professional mask slipped back into place. Gratitude doesn't change biology. Sam, that's a wild predator, not some fairy tale character. My job is to protect this community. Perhaps we can find a middle ground, Dr. Carson suggested. I'd like to set up some trail cameras around the lake, monitor the wolf's movements and behavior patterns. If it truly is focused on Max and not showing predatory interest in humans or livestock, that would be valuable data. You've got 1 week, Sheriff Thompson conceded reluctantly. After that, if there's any sign of escalation or danger, we're bringing in wildlife services. After they left, Sam sat alone on his porch, watching the afternoon light play across the lake's surface. Max had barely moved from his bed since returning home, his brief burst of energy seemingly depleted by the morning's excitement. "What do you think, buddy?" Sam asked, not expecting the old dog to hear him. "Your wolf friend going to behave himself?" To his surprise, Max lifted his head and gazed steadily at Sam before turning to look toward the forest beyond the lake, as if he understood exactly what was being asked. The media arrived the following day. First came the local newspaper and television station from Missoula. Then a wildlife documentary crew that happened to be filming in Yellowstone heard about the story and detoured north. By the third day, a national morning show had sent a correspondent, transforming the quiet shores of Silver Lake into an impromptu broadcast set. Sam declined most interview requests, uncomfortable with the attention and skeptical of how the story was being sensationalized. Dr. Carson became the de facto spokesperson, carefully framing the encounter in scientific terms while emphasizing the need for further observation before drawing conclusions. "We're missing the point here," Maggie Williams complained loudly to her regulars at the diner's counter. "This isn't about science or ratings, it's about loyalty and remembering who did right by you. Even when you're all grown up and gone wild, there's a lesson in that. If folks would stop yakking long enough to hear it." Despite his reluctance to become a public figure, Sam continued his daily walks with Max, though he now varied their route and timing to avoid the crowds of curious onlookers. He noticed with growing concern that Max seemed to be slowing down more each day. The old dog still insisted on their walks, but his limp was more pronounced, and he tired more quickly. On the 4th morning after the encounter, Sam spotted the first worrying sign Max had left food in his bowl, something the formerly voracious eater had never done. By the 5th day, Sam had to coax him to eat anything at all. Just old age catching up with him. Dr. Mitchell, the local veterinarian, assured Sam after a cursory examination. "Arthritis is progressing in his hips, but that's expected for a shepherd his age. Keep him comfortable. Keep him moving as much as he's willing. That's the best medicine." Sam wasn't convinced. Something in his gut told him Max's decline was more than just the usual aging process. He scheduled a more comprehensive examination at the veterinary hospital in Missoula for the following week. Meanwhile, Dr. Carson's trail cameras captured nightly evidence of the wolf's continued presence. The animal kept a respectful distance from town, but seemed to be establishing a routine of circling the lake in the pre-dawn hours, often pausing near Sam's cabin before disappearing back into the wilderness. "It's establishing a territory that includes Max," Dr. Carson explained, showing Sam the footage. "But it's being incredibly cautious about human contact. This isn't typical wolf behavior. They normally avoid human settlements entirely or in problem cases, become habituated and bold. This one seems to be threading a very deliberate middle path. Sheriff Thompson remained unconvinced. At the week's end, as promised, he called in State Wildlife Services to assess the situation. Their initial recommendation was clear. The wolf was too comfortable around human habitation and posed a potential risk that would only increase over time. Standard protocol would be removal, the wildlife officer explained at an increasingly heated town meeting. Either relocation to a more remote area or, if the animal resists trapping efforts, lethal measures. The meeting erupted into opposing factions. Ranchers and many longtime residents supported the wildlife officer's recommendation, citing historical problems with wolf reintroduction programs, a growing contingent of newer residents, conservation-minded retirees, and those touched by the story of Max and the wolf argued passionately for an exception. "We're talking about an animal that has shown no aggression," Dr. Carson pointed out. "In fact, it's demonstrated the opposite, recognition of a specific dog and submissive behavior." "Next, you'll be telling us it's going to start fetching the newspaper," Pete Davidson scoffed. "It's a wolf, not a storybook character. My calves are still dead." "There's been no evidence linking this particular wolf to those predations," Dr. Carson countered. From his seat in the back row, Sam watched the arguments with growing weariness. His thoughts were increasingly occupied with Max's deteriorating condition. That morning, he'd had to physically help the old dog down the porch steps, something that had never been necessary before. As the meeting devolved into increasingly personal accusations, Sam quietly slipped out the back door. The cool evening air was a relief after the stuffy community hall. He walked slowly toward his truck, his mind made up to focus on what mattered most, making whatever time Max had left as comfortable as possible. Sam holed up. Maggie Williams was hurrying after him, moving surprisingly quickly for a woman in her 70s. "You can't just leave," she said, catching her breath. "They're in there, deciding the fate of your wolf." "It's not my wolf, Maggie." "Like hell it isn't. That animal came back for Max. Seems to me that makes it your business." Sam sighed, leaning against his truck. "Max is sick. Maggie, really sick. I'm taking him to Missoula tomorrow for tests, but I've seen that look before. I think we're running out of time." Maggie's expression softened. She reached out and patted Sam's arm, her weathered hand surprisingly gentle. "All the more reason to speak up in there. That wolf might be the last friend your Max ever makes. Wouldn't want to deny him that. Would you?" The tests in Missoula confirmed Sam's worst fears. Advanced cancer had spread throughout Max's system, likely developing silently for months before the obvious symptoms appeared. The prognosis was measured in weeks, not months. "We can manage his pain," the veterinary oncologist explained gently. "Keep him comfortable. But at his age, with this stage of disease, treatment would be more traumatic than beneficial." Sam drove home in silence, occasionally reaching over to stroke Max's head where the old dog lay across the passenger seat. The German shepherd had always hated the veterinary hospital. The smells, the prodding, the other anxious animals. Today, he'd submitted to it all with an unnatural quietness that broke Sam's heart more than any diagnosis could. "We've had a good run, haven't we, buddy?" Sam said, his voice thick. "You saved more lives than most people ever will, including mine." Max had come into his life shortly after Jenny's death. when Sam was still actively trying to drink himself into an early grave. The responsibility of training and caring for the energetic shepherd puppy had given him a reason to get up each morning. Over the years, Max had become more than a companion or a working partner. He was the living embodiment of resilience and purpose that Sam had desperately needed. When they arrived home, Sam was surprised to find Dr. Carson waiting on his porch. Her expression told him she'd come with news, and not the good kind. "They've set the traps," she said without preamble. "Wildlife Services put them in this morning around the north side of the lake, where the cameras have been catching the wolf most frequently." Sam nodded wearily, helping Max down from the truck. "Humane traps? Yes, for relocation. But if they can't trap it within 3 days, they'll switch to more permanent methods." "I'm sorry, Sam. I argued as hard as I could." Sam watched Max slowly making his way up the porch steps, each movement clearly painful despite the medication. 3 days. That's all they'll give. Sheriff Thompson pushed for immediate action. This was the compromise. Sam nodded, too emotionally drained to summon any real anger. "I appreciate everything you've done, Dr. Carson, but right now, I need to focus on Max." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "How bad is it?" "Bad. Weeks. They said." The words felt like stones in his mouth. "I'm so sorry." She hesitated, then added, "For what it's worth, I think there's something special happening here. The way that wolf recognized Max, it's like something out of another time, when humans and wolves first began their ancient partnership." Sam managed a tired smile. "Maggie would agree with you. Says it's about loyalty and remembering who did right by you. Maggie Williams might be on to something there." Dr. Carson gathered her things to leave, then paused. "The cameras caught something else last night. The wolf wasn't alone. There were at least 2 others, hanging back in the trees. It might be forming a new pack in the area." After she left, Sam settled on the porch with Max beside him, watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and crimson. The knowledge of the traps set nearby sat uneasily with him, as did the news of additional wolves. Life was getting complicated in ways he hadn't anticipated when he'd chosen this quiet corner of Montana for his retirement. His thoughts were interrupted by Max suddenly lifting his head, ears swiveling forward despite his hearing loss. The old dog struggled to his feet, staring intently at the edge of the property where it met the forest. Sam followed his gaze and felt a chill run down his spine. The black wolf stood partially visible between 2 pine trees, its amber eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. But this time, it wasn't alone. 2 gray wolves, slightly smaller but no less impressive, flanked it at a respectful distance. "Well, I'll be damned," Sam whispered. Max let out a soft whine, taking a halting step toward the stairs. "Easy, boy," Sam cautioned, not sure what to make of this new development. The black wolf took a single step forward, then stopped, as if assessing the situation. Its gaze seemed to move deliberately between Max and Sam, communicating something that transcended the usual boundaries between wild and domestic, animal and human. Then, as suddenly as they had appeared, all 3 wolves melted back into the gathering dusk, leaving Sam with the unsettling feeling that he'd just been sized up and found worthy of something That night, for the first time in weeks, Max finished his entire dinner. Sheriff Thompson called an emergency press conference the following morning, his weathered face grim beneath the brim of his department-issued hat. The gathered reporters, still lingering in Silver Creek for the wolf dog story, sensed a new development and pressed closer. As of 0600 hours today, Wildlife Services has confirmed the presence of not one, but multiple wolves in close proximity to our town, Thompson announced, gesturing to the suited federal agent standing beside him. In light of this escalation, we're implementing immediate safety protocols. All residents are advised to keep pets indoors, avoid dawn and dusk outdoor activities, and report any sightings immediately. Is this the same wolf that approached the German Shepherd? A reporter called out. We believe the black wolf is indeed the same animal, now accompanied by what appears to be the beginning of a pack formation. The Wildlife Services agent confirmed, this significantly changes our risk assessment. A lone wolf can be unpredictable, but a pack establishing territory this close to human habitation represents a clear public safety concern. What about the special connection with the dog? Another reporter pressed. Sheriff Thompson's jaw tightened visibly. Folks, I understand this story has captured imaginations, but we're dealing with wild predators, not fairy tale characters. My responsibility is to the safety of this community. The announcement concluded with the declaration of a 48-hour timeline. If the wolves couldn't be trapped and relocated within that window, authorized hunters would be permitted to eliminate the threat. Sam learned about the accelerated timeline from Dr. Carson, who arrived breathless at his cabin just as he was helping Max down the porch steps for their morning routine. This is ridiculous, she fumed, pacing the length of his small yard. They're using the presence of additional wolves as justification to fast-track what they wanted to do all along. These animals haven't shown any aggression toward humans. Sam listened quietly, one hand resting on Max's head. The old dog seemed unusually alert this morning, his eyes tracking something in the distance that Sam couldn't see. I'm sorry, Dr. Carson, Sam finally said. I understand your frustration, but I've got more immediate concerns right now. He nodded toward Max, whose breathing had become noticeably labored overnight. Her expression softened immediately. Of course. How is he doing? Taking it day by day. Today's better than yesterday. At least he wanted to go outside. Sam managed a weary smile. Small victories. Dr. Carson knelt beside Max, gently running her hand along his side. The German Shepherd leaned into her touch, his tail offering a weak thump against the grass. He's a remarkable animal, she said softly. I've been reviewing the footage from that first encounter with the wolf. The way he stood his ground, the recognition. It's unlike anything I've documented before. Sam nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Max always had good judgment about who needed saving. Maybe he still does? Doctor, Carson stood, brushing grass from her knees. I should go. There's a town council emergency session this afternoon. Last chance to argue for a more measured approach. After she left, Sam continued their shortened walk, Max setting the pace with his halting gait. They managed to reach the small clearing overlooking the lake before the old dog needed to rest. Sam settled onto a fallen log, Max panting softly at his feet. Not much of an adventure today, is it, buddy? Sam said, scratching behind Max's ears. Remember when you used to swim all the way across to the far shore and back?" Max's ears twitched at the sound of Sam's voice, but his focus remained on the tree line, his nose occasionally sampling the air with increased interest. The first distant rumble of thunder caught Sam by surprise. Looking up, he noticed dark clouds gathering on the horizon, moving quickly toward the lake. Summer storms could develop with startling speed in the mountains, and this one had the appearance of a serious system. "Time to head back," Sam decided, rising stiffly from the log. Max didn't move. "Come on, boy," Sam encouraged, giving a gentle tug on the leash. "We need to beat the rain." The old dog remained firmly planted, his attention locked on something in the distance. Following his gaze, Sam felt a familiar prickle along his spine. Just visible between the trees stood the black wolf, its form partially obscured by undergrowth, but its amber eyes unmistakable. For several heartbeats, neither man nor dog nor wolf moved. Then Max let out a low whine, straining slightly against his leash toward the forest edge. "No way," Sam said firmly. "We're going home. Max, that's not a safe situation." Another rumble of thunder, closer this time, punctuated his words. The wolf took a single step forward, then stopped, its ears alert and forward. Sam tugged again on Max's leash, more insistently this time. The German shepherd reluctantly turned away from the wolf, following Sam with obvious reluctance back toward the trail that would lead them home. They had covered perhaps 100 yards when the storm hit with unexpected ferocity. Wind whipped through the trees, bending branches and sending loose pine needles swirling through the air. The first fat raindrops quickly gave way to a drenching downpour that reduced visibility to mere feet. "Just a little further," Sam encouraged, hunching his shoulders against the onslaught. A blinding flash of lightning, followed almost immediately by a deafening crack of thunder, sent Max into a panic. Before Sam could tighten his grip on the leash, the old dog bolted, not toward home, but back toward the clearing and the forest beyond. "Max!" Sam shouted, his voice lost in the howling wind. The red leash trailed behind the German shepherd like a banner as he disappeared into the curtain of rain. Sam broke into a run, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew Max's limitations. The old dog couldn't get far with his arthritis and illness. But in this weather, with the wolf nearby, even a short distance could prove dangerous. The rain plastered Sam's clothes to his body as he stumbled along the suddenly treacherous trail, calling Max's name futilely against the storm's fury. He reached the clearing where they'd rested, finding it empty. The trail continued toward the lake in one direction and into the deeper forest in another. Instinct told him Max had headed for the trees, perhaps following the scent of the wolf. Sam pushed forward, ignoring the branches that whipped at his face and the mud that sucked at his boots. Rational thought gave way to pure determination. He would not lose Max like this, alone and frightened in a storm. How long he searched, Sam couldn't say. The uniform gray of the storm-darkened forest distorted his sense of time and direction. He found himself in parts of the woods he'd never explored, calling hoarsely for his dog until his voice gave out. Finally, soaked to the bone and increasingly desperate, Sam spotted a flash of red through the trees. Max's leash. Relief surged through him as he pushed forward, only to freeze at the scene that greeted him. Max stood with his back to a large pine, the trailing leash tangled around a nearby sapling. Facing him, No more than 10 feet away was the black wolf. Neither animal was moving. Locked in some silent communication Sam couldn't begin to comprehend. He should have felt fear, seeing his aged, weakened companion cornered by a wild predator. Instead, Sam found himself oddly calm, sensing no menace in the tableau before him. "Max," he called softly. Both animals turned toward him simultaneously. The wolf's amber eyes met Sam's with unnerving intelligence before it turned back to Max. Then, to Sam's astonishment, the wolf lowered its head and gently took the trailing leash in its mouth. With a single sharp tug, the wolf freed the leash from the sapling. Rather than retreating, however, it began moving deeper into the forest. Max's leash still held carefully in its jaws. After a few steps, it paused, looking back at Max expectantly. Without hesitation, Max limped forward, following the wolf. "Max, stay," Sam commanded, breaking free of his shock. For the second time in their long partnership, Max ignored a direct command. The old dog continued after the wolf, his gait steadier than it had been in weeks despite the uneven forest floor. Sam had no choice but to follow. The storm continued unabated, water streaming down his face and thunder still crashing overhead. Through the trees ahead, he caught glimpses of Max's gray form and the larger black shape of the wolf, always just far enough ahead to stay out of reach. The forest grew denser, the trail disappearing entirely. Sam pushed through underbrush, slipped on moss-covered rocks, and forded a swollen stream, always keeping the animals in sight. His lungs burned, his legs ached, but he pressed on, driven by a fear that transcended mere physical discomfort. The terrain began to slope upward, the path taking them higher into the foothills that bordered Silver Creek to the north. Just as Sam was beginning to fear they were being led too far from safety, the wolf and Max disappeared around a rocky outcropping. Summoning his remaining strength, Sam scrambled up the slick incline and rounded the corner, only to stop short at what he found. A shallow cave opened in the hillside, sheltered from the worst of the storm by an overhanging ledge. Inside, Max had already settled onto the dry cave floor, his sides heaving with exertion, but his expression almost peaceful. The black wolf stood at the entrance, amber eyes fixed on Sam with what could almost be interpreted as expectation. Behind the wolf, deeper in the cave's shadows, Sam could make out the forms of the two gray wolves he'd glimpsed earlier. They watched warily, but made no threatening moves. Understanding dawned slowly. The wolf hadn't been leading them randomly through the forest. It had been guiding them to shelter. "Well, I'll be damned," Sam muttered, echoing his words from the night before. As if in response, the black wolf stepped aside, creating a clear path into the cave. The invitation couldn't have been more obvious if it had been spoken aloud. Sam hesitated only briefly before the driving rain at his back made the decision for him. He stepped cautiously into the cave, moving immediately to Max's side. The old dog's fur was soaked, but his eyes were bright as they hadn't been in weeks. The black wolf entered behind Sam, shaking water from its coat before settling near the cave entrance. Its gaze turned outward toward the storm. The other wolves remained deeper in the shadows, watchful but unthreatening. For what seemed like hours, they waited out the storm in this improbable company. Sam gradually relaxed enough to remove his sodden jacket and check Max for any injuries. Finding none, he settled with his back against the cave wall, one hand resting protectively on the German shepherd's flank. "You planned this, didn't you?" he murmured to Max, who responded with a contented sigh. Outside, the storm began to slacken, the thunder moving into the distance. As visibility improved, Sam could make out the valley below. Silver Lake, a gray mirror reflecting the cloudy sky. They were higher up the mountainside than he'd realized, with a clear view of the town in the distance. The sound of voices carried faintly up from below, search parties calling his name. With a start, Sam realized how his disappearance must appear a man and his ailing dog, missing during a severe storm in wolf-inhabited territory. The black wolf's ears pricked forward at the distant voices. It rose to its feet, moving to stand over Max in what appeared to be a protective posture. "They're looking for us," Sam explained, feeling slightly foolish for speaking to the wolf as if it could understand. "Friends, not enemies." The wolf's gaze was steady, unblinking. The two gray wolves had also risen, moving closer to the cave entrance with obvious tension in their postures. And then, carried clearly on the post-storm breeze, came a sound that turned Sam's blood to ice, the distinctive report of a hunting rifle, followed by shouted commands. The search party had arrived, and they were armed. "Hold your fire!" Sam's voice echoed down the mountainside, desperation giving it a volume he hadn't known he could still produce. "Bobby, it's Sam Blackridge. Hold your fire." The black wolf tensed at his sudden shout, amber eyes fixed on Sam with newfound wariness. The two gray wolves had already retreated deeper into the cave, melting into shadows with silent efficiency. Sam scrambled to the cave entrance, waving his arms frantically at the figures moving through the trees below. "Up here, we're up here." A flashlight beam cut through the diminishing rain, finding Sam's position. "Sam," Sheriff Thompson's voice carried clearly in the post-storm quiet. "Stay where you are. Are you hurt?" "I'm fine. Max is with me." "Don't shoot. There are wolves up here, even from this distance." Sam could see the hunting party stiffen at his warning, rifles shifting to ready positions. He counted at least 5 men beside Sheriff Thompson, all moving with the practiced caution of experienced hunters. "Get back in the cave," Sam urged, turning to Max and the black wolf still standing protectively near the old dog. "They won't understand." The wolf made no move to retreat, its gaze now shifting between Sam and the approaching search party. A low rumble, not quite a growl, vibrated in its chest. Sam knelt beside Max, gathering the worn leather leash in his hands. "Come on, boy. We need to go down to meet them before someone gets trigger-happy." Max struggled to his feet, his brief burst of energy during the storm clearly fading. The old dog swayed slightly, legs trembling with fatigue. When Sam gently tugged the leash, Max took one halting step forward before his back legs buckled. "Damn it," Sam muttered, his concern for Max momentarily overriding every other worry. He knelt again, running his hands over the dog's hindquarters, feeling the unnatural heat of inflammation. The exertion and damp cold had aggravated Max's condition. The black wolf moved closer, its massive head lowering to inspect Max with obvious concern. Without thinking, Sam reached out, his fingers brushing against the coarse fur of the wolf's neck. The animal allowed the contact for a heartbeat before stepping back, its attention shifting to the approaching voices. "Sam, Sheriff Thompson called again. "Closer now. We're coming up." The wolf's decision came in an instant. With one last look at Max, it turned and bounded toward the back of the cave where its companions waited. Instead of disappearing into the shadows, however, it paused, looking back expectantly. Sam understood with sudden clarity. "There's another way out." The wolf confirmed his suspicion by moving slightly to the left, revealing a narrow fissure in the cave wall, a second exit. Invisible from the cave entrance, Sam found himself facing an impossible choice. The logical, safe option was to wait for the search party. Max needed medical attention, and attempting to navigate unfamiliar mountain terrain with an incapacitated dog was foolhardy at best. Yet something deeper than logic pulled at him. The same instinct that had led Max to save a wolf pup from a burning forest against all his training and conditioning. "Sheriff's bringing help, boy," Sam said softly to Max, stroking the old dog's head. "You'll be okay." Max's eyes, clouded with pain but still alert, fixed on the black wolf waiting by the hidden exit. A soft whine escaped him as he tried again to stand, failing as his legs refused to support his weight. The wolf took a step back toward them, then froze as voices and footsteps sounded just outside the cave entrance. Sam to Sheriff Thompson appeared, rifle held ready, his experienced eyes quickly scanning the cave interior. "Jesus Christ, man. The whole town's been looking for you since the storm hit." Behind him, 4 other men filed into the cave, their expressions shifting from relief to tension as they registered the wolf's presence. "Don't shoot." Sam positioned himself between the hunters and the wolf. "It led us here, sheltered us from the storm." Sheriff Thompson's weathered face registered disbelief, but he raised a hand, signaling his men to hold position. "That's the black wolf, the one we've been tracking." "Yes, and it hasn't shown any aggression. Bobby, not once." One of the other men, Pete Davidson, snorted skeptically. "It lured you up here? More like, probably would have made a meal of you both if we hadn't shown up." "It had plenty of opportunity before you arrived," Sam countered, not taking his eyes off the sheriff. "Bobby, Max can't walk. He needs help getting down the mountain." The sheriff assessed the situation with the calm efficiency of his decades in law enforcement. "Pete, Jake, help Sam with his dog. The rest of you, keep your weapons ready, but don't fire unless I give the order." The wolf, seemingly understanding the temporary reprieve, remained motionless near the hidden exit, its amber eyes tracking every movement as Pete and another man cautiously approached Max. "Easy now," Pete murmured, some of his skepticism softening as he knelt beside the ailing German shepherd. "Poor old fella's in rough shape. Sam." Together, they fashioned a makeshift stretcher from rain jackets lashed to fallen branches, gently lifting Max onto the improvised carrier. The old dog submitted to their handling with uncharacteristic passivity, his eyes never leaving the black wolf. As they prepared to move out, Dr. Carson appeared at the cave entrance, breathless from the climb. "Thank God," she gasped, taking in the scene. "We've been searching since you were reported missing." Her gaze fell on the wolf, and the scientist in her immediately took over. "Extraordinary. It's maintaining distance but not fleeing despite all these people. This is precisely the unusual behavior pattern I've been documenting. Save the research observations for later, Doctor," Sheriff Thompson said firmly. "We need to get these 2 down the mountain before dark. As the group organized for descent, a sharp crack echoed from outside the cave, a rifle shot, followed immediately by a pained yelp. The black wolf bolted toward the hidden exit as Sam lunged forward. "Who fired?" he demanded. "Bobby, who the hell fired?" The sheriff was already moving toward the cave entrance, his expression thunderous. "That wasn't one of my men." Outside, they found chaos. 2 Wildlife Services agents had arrived separately from the search party, tracking the wolves with their own agenda. One stood with rifle raised, pointing toward a blood trail leading into the underbrush. "Target is wounded but mobile," the agent reported clinically. "Moving northeast along the ridgeline." "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Sheriff Thompson demanded. "These men are under my jurisdiction, and my orders were clear. No firing without my command." "With all due respect, Sheriff, we're operating under federal authority," the agent replied. "The elimination order for these wolves was approved this morning. We have our own protocols to follow." Sam barely registered the argument erupting between Thompson and the federal agents. His focus narrowed to the blood trail disappearing into the forest. Bright arterial blood. Too much of it for a minor wound. Max, still on his improvised stretcher, began struggling weakly, a high keening sound escaping his throat as he stared in the direction the wounded wolf had fled. "Sam, we need to get Max down now, Doctor," Carson urged, placing a hand on his arm. "He needs medical attention." The conflict tearing through Sam was almost physical in its intensity. Max needed immediate care, but the wolf that had recognized his dog, protected him, led them to safety, was out there bleeding, possibly dying. "Take him down," Sam decided, his voice rough. "I'll catch up." "Sam, don't be foolish," Sheriff Thompson interrupted, breaking away from his confrontation with the Wildlife Services agents. "That's a wounded predator out there, even if it recognized Max. It's dangerous now." "I'm going after it, Bobby," Sam said with quiet finality. "You can arrest me when I get back if you want, but I'm not letting it die alone out there." Dr. Carson stepped forward unexpectedly. "I'm coming with you. I have field medical training for wildlife. If there's any chance of saving it—" Sheriff Thompson looked between them. Decades of law enforcement training warring with something deeper, perhaps recognition of the same instinct that had led Max to save the wolf pup years ago. "1 hour, he finally said. "Then I'm sending a team after you, whether you like it or not." Max whined again from his stretcher, struggling against the restraints they'd rigged to keep him secure. Sam knelt beside him, gently stroking the old dog's head. "It's okay, buddy. I'll find your friend. You go with Pete and get taken care of. I promise I'll be right behind you." The German shepherd's eyes, clouded with pain but still trusting, held Sam's for a long moment before he settled back onto the stretcher with a soft sigh. Sam rose, turning to Dr. Carson. "Let's go." They followed the blood trail as it wound through the underbrush, the bright red spatters contrasting starkly against the rain-washed forest floor. Neither spoke, saving their breath for the difficult terrain and the increasing urgency of their mission. The trail led them along the ridgeline for nearly half a mile before descending sharply into a small ravine. Here, the spatters gave way to a larger pool of blood beside a fallen log. It stopped here, Dr. Carson observed, kneeling to examine the sign, probably trying to assess its injury. Sam nodded grimly, his eyes already scanning the area for the continuing trail. There, he pointed to more spatters leading down into the ravine. It's heading for water. They descended carefully, the ground still slick from the storm. At the bottom of the ravine, a small stream gurgled over moss-covered rocks. The blood trail led directly to the water's edge and disappeared. "Damn it," Sam muttered. "It crossed over." A low growl from the opposite bank froze them in place. Through the gathering dusk, Sam could make out not one but three shapes. The black wolf, wounded but standing, flanked by its two gray companions. The black wolf's side was matted with blood, its breathing visibly labored even from this distance, yet it maintained its posture, amber eyes fixed warily on the humans. "It's lost too much blood," Dr. Carson whispered. "I need to get closer to assess the wound properly." "They won't let us approach," Sam replied, keeping his voice low and even. "Not both of us." Before Dr. Carson could respond, the decision was made for them. The sharp report of another rifle shot echoed through the ravine. The gunshot cracked through the ravine, sending birds scattering from nearby trees. Sam instinctively dropped to a crouch, pulling Dr. Carson down with him as he scanned frantically for the source of the shot. Across the stream, the three wolves had vanished into the underbrush, leaving only trampled vegetation and another ominous splash of blood on a boulder. "Federal agents, stay where you are." The voice came from upstream, followed by the sound of someone crashing through the brush with little attempt at stealth. "It's the Wildlife Services agent." "Doctor," Carson whispered, her face pale with anger. "He followed the same blood trail we did." Sam made a split-second decision, gesturing downstream. "Go that way. Follow the wolves if you can. I'll delay him." "Sam, go," he insisted. "That wolf doesn't have much time." She hesitated only briefly before nodding and slipping away along the stream bank. Staying low and moving with surprising stealth for an academic, Sam straightened up, deliberately making noise as he called out, "Over here, I've lost the trail." The Wildlife Services agent appeared moments later, his agency-issued jacket soaked with sweat and his rifle held ready. Sam recognized him as the same man who had fired the first shot at the cave. "Mr. Blackridge," the agent acknowledged with a curt nod. "You shouldn't be out here. This is now a federal operation." "I heard another shot," Sam said, deliberately positioning himself to block the downstream view. "Did you hit it?" The agent shook his head. "Warning shot to flush them out. Got a glimpse but no clear target." His eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Where's Dr. Carson? Sheriff said she was with you." "She turned back." Sam lied smoothly. "Her ankle was giving her trouble on this terrain." The agent didn't look entirely convinced, but seemed unwilling to waste time on questioning. "You should head back too. Wounded predators are unpredictable, and these wolves have already shown abnormal behavior patterns." "I spent 30 years in fire rescue," Sam replied evenly. "I've dealt with my share of dangerous situations. This isn't a burning building, Mr. Blackridge. This is a wild animal that saved my dog's life today." Sam interrupted. "And possibly mine too." The agent's expression hardened. "With all due respect, sir, you're anthropomorphizing. These are predators following instinctual patterns, not making conscious moral choices." A memory flashed in Sam's mind. The wolf deliberately taking Max's leash in its mouth, leading them to shelter, standing guard while they waited out the storm. If that wasn't conscious choice, Sam didn't know what was. Maybe, Sam conceded outwardly. But I'd still like to see this through. The agent considered him for a moment before reluctantly nodding. Stay behind me, then. And if I give you an order, follow it immediately. Sam agreed, falling in behind the agent as they began moving downstream, exactly the direction Dr. Carson had gone. Sam deliberately set a slower pace, occasionally stumbling or pausing to check signs, buying precious minutes for the doctor to get ahead of them. The light was fading rapidly now, the forest filling with long shadows. The agent switched on a tactical flashlight, sweeping its beam across the stream bank as they moved. There, he said suddenly, pointing to a clear paw print in the mud. They crossed back over, all three of them. Sam's heart sank as he realized the wolves had indeed crossed to their side of the stream, potentially putting them on a collision course with Dr. Carson. The agent picked up his pace, following the fresh tracks with grim determination. They had gone perhaps a quarter mile when a sound stopped them both, a low, distinctive howl that echoed through the darkening forest. It wasn't close, but it wasn't far either, and it carried a quality that raised the hair on the back of Sam's neck. That's not right, the agent muttered, adjusting his grip on his rifle. Sam knew exactly what the man meant. The howl didn't sound like a hunting call or a territorial claim. It sounded like mourning. A second howl joined the first, creating a haunting harmony that seemed to penetrate to the bone. Sam had heard coyotes and wolves before, but never anything that sounded so eerily expressive, so undeniably emotional. It's coming from that direction, the agent said, pointing toward a rocky outcropping about 200 yards ahead. He began moving forward with renewed purpose, his flashlight beam cutting through the gathering darkness. Sam followed, an increasing sense of dread building with each step. As they approached the outcropping, the howling stopped abruptly, replaced by an unnatural silence. No birds, no insects, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. The agent rounded the rocks first, his flashlight beam sweeping the small clearing beyond. He stopped so suddenly that Sam nearly collided with him. "Jesus Christ," the agent whispered. In the harsh glare of the flashlight, the scene unfolded with brutal clarity. The black wolf lay on its side in the center of the clearing, its flank still rising and falling with labored breaths, but its eyes closed. Dr. Carson knelt beside it, her hands pressed against a wound in its shoulder, dark with blood. The two gray wolves stood just beyond, watching with an unsettling intentness. They made no aggressive moves, but their presence created an almost palpable tension in the air. "Step away from the animal, Dr. Carson," the agent ordered, raising his rifle. "Lower your weapon," she replied without looking up, her voice steady despite the extraordinary situation. "I've almost got the bleeding controlled." "I said step away." The agent's voice rose, his finger visibly tightening on the trigger guard. "If you shoot, Doctor," Carson said with deadly calm, "you'll hit me first." Sam moved forward slowly, placing himself partially between the agent and the scene before them. "Nobody's shooting anybody. Let's all take a breath here." The standoff stretched for several agonizing seconds, broken only by the black wolf's labored breathing and the soft, reassuring murmur of Dr. Carson's voice as she continued working on the wound. "This is the same wolf pup from the fire," she said quietly. not looking away from her task. I've confirmed it with DNA samples I collected from the trail cameras, the same one Max saved. The agent's expression remained skeptical, but Sam could see uncertainty creeping in around the edges. That's impossible to verify in the field. The burn scars match exactly, Dr. Carson continued. And look at this. She carefully moved aside some of the thick fur on the wolf's shoulder, revealing a small metallic object embedded just under the skin. This is a wildlife tracking chip from the rehabilitation center. We can scan it for the ID number. Sam's mind was racing. You knew before today. Why didn't you say something? I only got the DNA confirmation this morning, she admitted. I was going to tell you. But then the storm hit and you went missing. She trailed off, focusing again on the wound. The bullet went through clean. If I can stop the bleeding, he has a chance. The agent lowered his rifle slightly, professional training warring with the unprecedented situation before him. Even if it is the same animal, that doesn't change protocol. This is still a dangerous predator in proximity to a populated area. A predator that's demonstrated altruistic behavior toward both a dog and humans, Dr. Carson countered. Think about what that means scientifically, ethically. One of the gray wolves took a step forward, drawing an immediate reaction from the agent, who raised his rifle again. Don't, Sam said sharply. They're not threatening us. They're concerned for him. The agent's incredulous expression would have been almost comical in any other circumstance. You're both out of your minds. These are wild animals, not characters in a nature documentary. Then why haven't they attacked? Sam challenged. There are two healthy wolves standing right there, watching us handle their injured pack member. By everything we think we know about wolf behavior, they should either be fleeing or attacking, but they're doing neither. As if to emphasize his point, the gray wolf that had stepped forward lowered itself to the ground, maintaining its vigilant watch but clearly making no move to approach. The agent's radio crackled suddenly, making everyone except Dr. Carson jump. Sheriff Thompson's voice came through, distorted but recognizable. Agent Holloway, report your position. Over. The agent, Holloway, hesitated before responding. About a mile northeast of the cave site. I've located the wounded target. Dr. Carson and Blackridge are with me. He paused, then added, Situation is complicated. Over. Define complicated. Over. Thompson replied. Holloway looked at the scene before him, a wildlife biologist treating a wounded wolf while two others maintained a peaceful vigil, and seemed at a loss for words. You need to see this for yourself. Sheriff, we're on the eastern ridge, near the old mining path. Over. Understood. Stay put. We're on our way. Out. As the radio fell silent, Dr. Carson sat back on her heels, exhaustion evident in her posture. I've done what I can here. The bleeding has slowed, but he needs real medical attention. Veterinary attention, Holloway corrected. Yes, she agreed, and quickly. Sam knelt beside her, getting his first close look at the black wolf. Despite its wild nature, he could see the echo of the pup Max had saved years ago, something in the set of its ears, the pattern of the burn scars visible beneath the fur. Its eyes remained closed, but its breathing seemed slightly steadier. Will he make it? Sam asked quietly. Dr. Carson's expression was guarded. Hard to say. He's lost a lot of blood, and there's risk of infection. But he's strong. One of the gray wolves, The larger of the two approached cautiously, ignoring Holloway's warning sound as it came to sniff at the black wolf's muzzle. The injured animal responded with a faint movement, a barely perceptible lift of its head. "They're a family unit," Dr. Carson observed. "Not just pack members. See how the female is staying back with what appears to be this year's pups." She nodded toward the tree line where, now that Sam looked carefully, he could make out smaller shapes partially hidden in the underbrush. "Jesus," Holloway muttered. "There are more of them. A whole new generation," Dr. Carson confirmed. "And they've been living in these mountains for months without a single confirmed attack on humans." The sound of approaching voices signaled the arrival of Sheriff Thompson and his search party. As they entered the clearing, the tableau before them brought them to an abrupt halt. The wounded black wolf, Dr. Carson kneeling beside it with blood-covered hands, Sam standing protectively nearby, and the other wolves maintaining their careful vigil. "Well, I'll be damned," Sheriff Thompson said, echoing Sam's earlier sentiment. "When you said complicated, you weren't exaggerating." As the newcomers absorbed the scene, Dr. Carson's phone chimed with an incoming message. She glanced at it, then looked up at Sam, her expression suddenly grave. "It's about Max," she said quietly. The world seemed to narrow to that single sentence. Everything else, the wolves, the agents, the forest itself, fading into insignificance. "They've got him at the vet clinic in town," Dr. Carson continued, reading from her phone. "He's in critical condition. The exertion and exposure were too much strain on his system." She looked up, meeting Sam's eyes directly. "They're asking if you want to come say goodbye." The Silver Creek Veterinary Clinic maintained emergency hours only on weekends, but tonight every light blazed from its windows. Sam barely registered the small crowd gathered in the parking lot as Sheriff Thompson's cruiser pulled up to the entrance. The drive down from the mountain had passed in a blur of headlights and murmured conversations that hadn't penetrated the fog of Sam's worry. "I'll handle things up at the ridge," Sheriff Thompson said as Sam reached for the door handle. "You go see about Max." Sam nodded wordlessly, unable to form a proper thank you past the knot in his throat. The events of the past hours, the storm, the cave, the wounded wolf. And now this seemed to be happening to someone else, a character in some improbable story rather than his own life. Dr. Mitchell met him at the clinic door, her normally cheerful face drawn with professional concern. "He's hanging in there. Sam, we've got him on IV fluids and pain management, but his system is shutting down. The cancer, combined with the stress and exposure today—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. "Can I see him?" Sam asked, his voice sounding distant to his own ears. She nodded, leading him through the small waiting area where, Sam dimly realized, several townspeople sat vigil. Maggie Williams rose from her chair as he passed, reaching out to squeeze his arm wordlessly. Pete Davidson nodded grimly from his corner, the usual gruffness in his expression softened by genuine concern. Max lay on a padded table in the treatment room, an IV line running into his foreleg and monitoring equipment showing his weakening vital signs. The proud German shepherd who had once bounded through forests and pulled survivors from rubble looked impossibly diminished, his once powerful frame now seeming too small for the spirit it contained. "Hey, buddy," Sam whispered. moving to the table and gently stroking the gray muzzle. "You sure had quite an adventure today." Max's eyes opened at the sound of Sam's voice, cloudy with medication but still alert enough to recognize his person. His tail moved in the faintest suggestion of a wag. "Doctor." Mitchell quietly adjusted something on the IV drip. "I'll give you some time," she said, stepping back toward the door. "He's not in any pain right now." Sam pulled a stool closer to the table and sat, keeping one hand on Max's head. With his other hand, he gently stroked the old dog's side, feeling the two prominent ribs beneath the once thick fur. "You knew, didn't you?" Sam said softly. "You knew that Wolf was the same pup all this time. I thought you were just getting old and tired, but you were watching for him." Max's eyes never left Sam's face, a lifetime of understanding passing between man and dog without need for words. "You always were smarter than me," Sam continued, his voice catching. "Jenny used to say that. Remember how she'd sneak you those treats when she thought I wasn't looking, said you deserved them for putting up with an old grouch like me." The mention of Jenny's name brought a familiar ache, but for the first time in years, it wasn't accompanied by the crushing weight of guilt. Something had shifted in Sam during the day's extraordinary events, some perspective gained that he couldn't yet fully articulate. A soft knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. Dr. Carson stood in the doorway, her clothes still stained with the black wolf's blood, but her expression resolute. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said. "I wanted to let you know we've stabilized the wolf. The local wildlife rehab center is sending a transport team." Sam nodded acknowledgement, his attention still primarily on Max, whose breathing had become more labored in just the short time since he'd arrived. "There's something else," Dr. Carson added, stepping further into the room. The DNA confirmation wasn't just about identifying the wolf as the same pup. It revealed something unusual about this particular animal. Despite his preoccupation with Max, Sam found his curiosity piqued. "What do you mean?" "This wolf carries a rare genetic marker associated with unusually high intelligence and social cognition," Dr. Carson explained. "It's been documented in only a handful of wolf populations worldwide. The researchers at the center have been hoping to study this genetic line for years." "So he really did understand what was happening," Sam said, thinking back to the wolf's deliberate actions during the storm. "It wasn't just instinct. Intelligence in non-human animals exists on a spectrum we're only beginning to understand," Dr. Carson said. "But yes, I believe this wolf possesses exceptional cognitive abilities, even for its species." Max stirred beneath Sam's hand, a small whimper escaping him as he tried to shift position. Sam immediately refocused his attention, gently helping the old dog find a more comfortable position. "Doctor?" Carson moved closer, her scientific interest softening into compassion as she observed the pair. "He's a remarkable animal, too," she said quietly. "To recognize that wolf after all this time, to form a connection across species boundaries, that's exceptional by any standard." "He's always seen things others missed," Sam replied, his voice rough with emotion. "People, animals, didn't matter to Max. He just knew who needed help." They fell silent then, the only sounds in the room the gentle beep of monitoring equipment and Max's increasingly labored breathing. After a few minutes, Dr. Carson excused herself, promising to return with any updates on the wolf's condition. Left alone with Max again, Sam found himself reflecting on the strange journey that had brought them to this moment. From the ashes of his life in Phoenix to this small Montana town, from the forest fire that had first connected them to a wounded wolf to today's extraordinary reunion, none of it made logical sense. And yet all of it felt somehow meant to be. "We had a good run, didn't we, buddy?" Sam whispered, leaning close to Max's ear. "Best partner a man could ask for." Max's eyes, growing heavier with each passing minute, remained fixed on Sam's face with unwavering trust. His tail offered one more weak thump against the table. Outside the treatment room, Sam could hear the murmur of voices as more townspeople apparently arrived at the clinic. The door opened again, revealing Sheriff Thompson, his uniform still damp and muddy from the mountain. "Thought you'd want to know," the sheriff said quietly. "The wolf transport is here. They're taking him to the Regional Wildlife Medical Center in Missoula. Dr. Carson's going with them." Sam nodded his thanks for the update, his hand never leaving Max's head. "There's something else," Thompson added, seeming uncharacteristically hesitant. "Those other wolves, the ones that were with the black one, they're following the transport vehicle, keeping their distance, but definitely following. Wildlife Services doesn't know what to make of it." Under different circumstances, Sam might have found humor in the image of staid federal agents confounded by wolf behavior that defied their textbooks. Now, he simply accepted it as one more piece of the inexplicable connection that had been revealed today. "Bobby," Sam said, his voice barely audible, "I need to ask a favor." "Name it," the sheriff replied without hesitation. "When the time comes, I want to bury Max up there, near the cave where the wolves took us." Sheriff Thompson didn't immediately respond, and Sam could almost see the man's internal struggle between official protocol and human compassion. "It's National Forest land," Thompson finally said. "Technically not allowed." "I know," the sheriff sighed, his weathered face softening. "I'll make it happen, Sam. You have my word." "Thank you." After Thompson left, the hours blurred together for Sam. Dr. Mitchell checked in periodically, making small adjustments to Max's medication but offering no false hope. The monitoring equipment told its own story, the steady decline of a body that had simply reached the end of its remarkable journey. Near midnight, Maggie Williams brought Sam a thermos of coffee and a sandwich he couldn't bring himself to eat. She sat with him for a while, sharing stories of her own dogs from years past, her usual gossip-laden chatter replaced by the simple wisdom of someone who understood loss intimately. "Animals know," she said before leaving. "They understand more than we give them credit for. Max knows how much you love him. Sam, that's what matters in the end." As the small hours of morning approached, Max's breathing grew more shallow, the pauses between each breath extending until Sam found himself counting the seconds, willing the next inhalation to come. "It's okay, buddy," Sam whispered, his face close to Max's ear. "You don't have to keep fighting. You've done enough. More than enough." Whether Max understood the words or simply the tone, something in the old dog seemed to relax at Sam's permission. His next exhale came with a soft sigh, and the pause that followed stretched until Sam knew, with absolute certainty, that it would not be broken. The monitor confirmed what his heart already knew. Max was gone. Sam sat motionless for several minutes, one hand still resting on the cooling body of his companion, partner, and friend. The grief was there, a vast ocean of it waiting to crash over him. But beneath it ran a current of something else, gratitude for the years they'd shared, for the lives they'd saved together, for the extraordinary final chapter that had unfolded in these Montana mountains. Outside the clinic windows, the first gray light of dawn was beginning to soften the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, carried on the still morning air, came the sound of a wolf's howl, long and mournful, echoing across the valley. Sam listened, feeling the sound resonate in some deep primal part of his being. Whether it was the black wolf, now receiving treatment in Missoula, or one of its companions still roaming the ridgeline above Silver Creek, he couldn't know, but he chose to believe it was a farewell, one predator honoring another, a recognition of kinship that transcended the boundaries humans so carefully constructed between wild and tame, between animal and person. And "He hears you," Sam whispered to the dawn. "Wherever he is now, I know he hears you." In the twilight of our years, we recognize the profound truth that Sam Blackridge discovered on that Montana mountainside. The connections that truly matter transcend all boundaries we create. Like Max, the loyal German shepherd who saved a wolf pup against all his training. We sometimes find our greatest purpose when we follow our hearts instead of our rule books. We've all faced our forest fires, the losses, the heartbreaks, the moments that burned away what we thought we knew. Yet like that remarkable wolf who returned years later, gratitude and recognition can appear in our lives when we least expect it, proving that no act of compassion is ever truly forgotten. As we watch our faithful companions grow gray, as we feel our own bodies beginning to betray us, remember